This is the tale of Utgard and Loki. While Thor and Loki were traveling far from Asgard in Thor's goat-drawn chariot, night soon overtook them. They soon spotted a farm in the distance, and the farmer and his family welcomed Thor and Loki into their house.
Come inside.
To repay his hosts for their hospitality, Thor offered his goats for supper, knowing that he can bring them back to life afterwards and not be at any loss. After the meal, Thor laid the goats' hides on the floor and instructed his host to place the bones on the hides after the meat had been gleaned from them. The farmer had 2 children, a boy and a girl. Despite the thunder god's instructions, the boy broke open one of the goat's leg bones to suck out the bone marrow before placing it on the hide with the others. When Thor awoke the following morning, he hollowed the goat's hides and bones with his hammer, whereupon the goats sprang back to life. One of them, however, had a lame hind leg. Thor immediately knew the reason for this, and was so furious at the farmer and his family that he would have slain them all on the spot had the farmer not offered him his children. The boy and the girl had to be his servants. Thor accepted, and he, Loki, and the children pressed onward on foot, leaving the handicapped goats behind. The party's goal was to reach the land of the giants. They had crossed a thick, tangled forest. Just as night was falling, they decided to go to sleep. Yet they were jostled awake by a great earthquake. Running outside, they found a sleeping giant whose snores caused the earth to rumble and shake. Thor, who hated giants, clutched his hammer and resolved to smite this sure foe of his. But the giant awoke at the last second and seemed to be cheered, or at least amused, by the sight of Thor and his companions. The giant introduced himself as Skrymir, but said that he already knew full well to whom he was introducing himself. The giant then proposed that he accompany them on their journey.
Let's go.
To this, the god agreed, and off they went through the forests and hills. At night, they took shelter beneath a venerable oak. Skrymir had been carrying all of their provisions in his bag, and when the giant fell asleep and the task of opening the bag fell to Thor, the god himself found unable to untie the giant's knots. This so angered Thor that he struck the dozing Skrymir in the forehead, hoping to kill him. However, the giant awoke calmly and asked if a leaf had fallen on his head.
Was that a leaf?
Later in the night, the giant's snores grew so loud they echoed through the valleys like thunder. Thor, annoyed by his inability to sleep and wanting to kill the giant anyway, tried a second time to smite him by striking him in the forehead. But, much as before, Skrymir awakened and asked if an acorn had fallen on his head.
Had an acorn fallen on my head?
Just before dawn, Thor decided to try one more time to end Skrymir's life, but the giant awakened, asked if some birds had roosted above him, and shaken some dirt from the branches onto his face.
These birds wildin'.
Skrymir departed from his companions and Thor, and the company pressed onward toward a castle called Utgard. Around midday, the travelers reached their destination. The gate was locked, however, and no one was there to open it. But Thor and the others found that they could fit through the very large spaces between the bars of the gates easily enough.
Yeah, this is a nice neighborhood. You know white folks live here.
Once inside, they found a hall where men sat eating and drinking. Amongst them was the king of the castle, the giant, who immediately recognized his new guests and set about taunting them for their diminutive size.
Damn, you guys are small. You guys shop at Baby Gap.
Wanting to salvage his dignity and that of his companions, Loki proudly asserted that no one else in the castle could eat faster than he could. The giant challenged him to prove this boast by entering a contest with one of the men there, whose name was Logi. A trough of meat was set before them, with Loki at one end and Logi at the other, and they were to see who could reach the middle first. They met in the middle at the same time, but while Loki had eaten all of the meat between the end and the middle, Loki had eaten the meat, the bones, and even the trough itself. Loki had clearly lost. The boy, who was an extremely swift runner, then offered to race anyone in the castle. The giant led him out to a racetrack and appointed one Hugi to compete with him. By the time Hugi reached the finish line, he was so far ahead of the boy that he doubled back to meet his contestant. They then raced a second time, and once again Hugi beat the boy by a long bow shot. Still, they raced a third time, but the boy fared even worse. He was still at the midpoint of the track by the time Hugi finished. Thor then challenged anyone in the castle to a drinking contest, something at which he had no little skill. The giant had one of his servants fetch the kind of drinking horn from which the giant's men were said to drink. When it was placed before Thor, the giant informed him that whoever could finish the horn in one drink was considered a great drinker. Whoever could do it in two was considered fair, but no one in his retinue was considered as poor a drinker as to be unable to finish it in three. Thor drank mightily, but by the time he had to pause for breath, the level of liquor in the horn had barely lowered.
Gulp.
So he gave it a second try, straining to gulp and gulp until his breath failed him. This time, the level had gone down appreciably, but the better part of the horn still remained. His third drink was even more formidable than the previous two, but in the end, much was still left. By that point, however, Thor could drink no more and gave up. Then the giant suggested that Thor attempt to simply lift his cat from the floor, but Thor proved unable to do this. In a rage, Thor challenged anyone in the castle to wrestle with him. Insultingly, the giant appointed an old woman, Ellie, who was one of his servants. But the great god lost at even this contest.
Take that, snipper snapper. Cut your hair.
After this, the giant decided that there should be no more contests, and the company spent the night there in the castle. In the morning, they rose and prepared to leave. After the giant had showed them out of the castle, he confided to them what had actually transpired in their contest, saying to Thor, "Now that you have left my castle, I shall see to it that you have never entered it again. The knot on my provision bag that you almost succeeded in untying had been wrought in iron. I deflected the blows you attempted to inflict on me with your hammer. Instead of my face, you hit the mountainside and carved 3 gaping valleys into it. Had you struck me, I would have been killed then and there." Loki held on his own remarkably well in the eating contest, since his opponent was none other than fire itself. So it was with the boy, too. He raced against thought, which nobody could ever hope to outrun. The far end of the horn, from which you drank, was connected to the sea, and we were actually greatly afraid that you were going to drink it all. When you cross over the sea again, you will see how much you have lowered its level. My cat was actually the Midgard serpent, whom you succeeded in raising out of the ocean and into the sky. And finally, you wrestled against old age, and took a long, long time to fall. Now, for your sake and for ours, leave and never come back." Thor was so angered by this humiliating trickery that he raised his hammer and prepared to slay the giant and smash his castle to pieces. But when he turned to do so, he saw no giant and no castle, just a vast empty plain.